I'm Jess, Assistant Director at Saline District Library. Welcome to the final National Poetry Month Mini Podcast. Poetry Month is a time to celebrate poets and poetry in all forms. And joining me today to talk about poetry is Library Director Karrie Waarala. Welcome, Karrie.
Hey, Jess.
Hello. Karrie, you have a background in poetry, right?
I do. I have a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, in which I focused on poetry and got that from University of Southern Maine.
Very cool. During other recordings for this month's mini podcasts, we discuss poetry in general, novels and verse, and the importance of poetry in teen literature. Another form of poetry that is popular with lovers of the genre is performance poetry, which is just what it sounds like. Poetry that is written to be performed to an audience. Types of performance poetry are poetry readings, spoken word, jazz poetry, and slam poetry. Do you have any personal experience with performance poetry?
I do, and it goes all the way back to in 2000. I was at the National Poetry Slam representing Kalamazoo. I stayed involved in the national slam scene for about 10 years, even served as the executive director of the organization that runs those events. And from there, as part of my MFA, I wrote, produced, and performed a one-woman show that was all poetry and monologues, and that debuted in 2011.
That's pretty awesome. What was the name of your one-woman show?
It was called Long Gone, a Poetry Sideshow. It was all told from the point of view of a tattooed lady in the circus sideshow.
Which is your dream job, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So do you have any recommendations for anyone wanting to get into performance poetry?
I do. First off, when you're writing your poetry, make sure that you're paying attention to how it sounds, not just how it reads on the page. Always be reading your work out loud while you're working on it. There might be a turn of phrase that looks fantastic when it's written, and then you try to say it out loud and you trip over it. You don't want to have stuff like that in your writing. I also recommend that you watch a lot of it, just like any good writer should be an avid reader. Anybody who's going to perform poetry needs to make sure that they are watching a lot of performance poetry. You can go on YouTube, find all sorts of greats like Patricia Smith. But then make sure to develop your own style as well. You don't want to just copy poets that are out there already doing this. Mm-hmm. And finally, I recommend just starting small. Just start reading your poetry at open mics. It can be really nerve-wracking the very first time you do it. So just start small and friendly and eventually work your way up from there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for those great tips, Karrie, and thank you for joining me. And thank you to all of you for listening to our National Poetry Month Mini Podcast. If you enjoyed this recording or missed one this month, you can find them on our YouTube channel. Until next time, happy reading.